you're Bruce Wayne, the Prince of Gotham. You'd have to go 1,000 miles to meet someone who didn't know your name. So don't come down here with your anger, trying to prove something to yourself. This is a world you never understand, and you always fear. But you don't understand.
Hi, this is Michael Uslan. You're listening to Batman on Film.
Talking about the tales where the shadows crawl. Chapter by chapter, we've covered it all. From the capes and cows to the darkest night. Every film, every fight, a fancy light. Turn the page, Gotham's glory awaits. Batman on film, where legends create. Oh, we ride through the Gotham skies. From the bat's rise to the villain's eyes. Turn the reels, where the story is bright. A Batman on film, the legends alive. Break down the madness, scene by scene, where the city's close and dark dreams convene. From the old to the new, the saga unfolds. A vigilante sail in the echoing cold. Step into Gotham where justice turns. Through words and whispers, the bat returns. Oh, we ride through the Gotham skies. From the bat's rise to the villain's eyes. Turn the reels where the story is bright. I'm Batman on film, the legend's alive. In the shadow of the night, tales untold. Pages turn as a saga unfolds. Join the journey in this timeless quest. Batman on film stands above the rest. Oh, we ride through the Gotham skies. From the bat's rise to the villain's eyes. Turn the reels where the story is bright. I'm Batman on film, the legend's alive.
Welcome to Chapter 4 of Batman Begins, Chapter by Chapter, a Batman on Film podcast, celebrating the 20th anniversary of Christopher Nolan's game-changing film. I'm senior contributor Javi Trujillo, and joining me today is an absolute legend of the Great White North, a box office prognosticator, the Bat Chin himself, Carlos. Welcome, Carlos. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. Always an honor to join one of the BOF shows. I've been in the water a little bit more than usual lately with you guys, but yeah, I absolutely love it here. So happy to be here, and yeah, hopefully I can contribute in a meaningful way to this Batman Begins discussion, celebrating its 20th anniversary.
I'm sure you will. And as this is your first time on Chapter by Chapter, I've got a few specific questions for you. So before we get into the episode proper, tell me about your first experience of seeing Batman Begins. Where and when did you go see it for the first time?
So for the first time, it's interesting in the lead up. I was one of those people that was just so profoundly stung by Batman and Robin. And I was a bit of a naysayer as to what it was. And like you'll remember, the comic book movie genre outside of Spider-Man, because even X-Men kind of did its own thing where they were a little shy as to fully embracing the comic book lore. So I was skeptical as to what they were going to do with Batman Begins, and that first teaser trailer, I was just like, holy smokes, this could be something cool. But in a pre-high-speed internet world, there was only little flashes and glimpses of things that I had caught, and it was just a busy time in life for us. And I remember my wife being very pregnant with Batman when Batman Begins came out, and so we went to the theater. It wasn't an opening night thing. It was just like yeah, this is the first convenient night, and let's hope for the best, brace for the worst. I think with having followed Nolan for a minute and with his filmography, I didn't. I thought it was gonna skew a lot closer to X-Men, where it was like, we'll kind of take a few winks at the fact that he's this costume superhero kind of guy, but on the whole, we're gonna just be mired in telling a serious story. Kind of that approach was Joker. I have a crime drama I want to tell, but we're just gonna so happen to have it rooted in a comic book. And yeah, I remember rolling to nice fancy new multiplex theater and sit down and my mind being absolutely blown to the point that when they had that Ra's al Ghul reveal during the birthday party scene, I was so giddy that my wife told me to calm down.
That's
And it's
awesome.
just like, yeah, she's just like, you need to just take a breath and calm down. And I just lapped that thing up, and it supercharged my love affair with Batman on film once again. Like took it, like honestly, it was past where the Keaton stuff took me,
Mhm.
because as much as I love that, I had always been somebody who experienced these characters on the page first. And um, as great as Batman '89 is, it's not the Batman from the comic books, and that this was so much closer, if not bang on, to what they had done with Batman Year One and whatnot. That yeah, I was giddy. Giddy is probably the best word to describe my first experience with Batman Begins.
Where does it fall amongst your favorites?
Oh, it is my favorite.
Nice.
It still tips, yeah, ahead of everything else. And I think just because it is the most Bruce Wayne story, and I love Batman, and there's the things that make that character great are all on display in this movie. And yeah, it's number one for me. Like, as much as I love the Reeves stuff, and the Dark Knight is obviously the legendary high watermark for comic book films. There's just something about this one that it'll always be special to me, and it just does it. I don't know. It's just so close to what I've always wanted for an ideal Batman film heading into the explosion of this genre.
So just as an aside, like who would you say is your favorite Batman artist?
Oh, like, it might be a bit of recency bias, but honestly, like, Fabok is my favorite. Like, he captures the essence of the character so well, and but the art is also really sharp at the same time, and
Yeah.
he has a really good job of blending that shadowy Batman with um, the kind of striking image that you'd get from somebody like a Jim Lee type of thing. So yeah, for my money, he's by far my favorite Batman artist.
I mean, that's a pretty good choice. I can't fault you on that. He is definitely up there. How about favorite Batman actor?
Uh, probably say Bale is the closest. We like outside of the like I think the voice he nails in the first Batman, like in Begins, um, and then it kind of goes off the rails a little bit, and like the Achilles heel of Christopher Nolan with the sound mixing, um, might might have played into some of that. But
Yeah.
yeah, like Bale's probably the closest. Like Ben, I don't think had an opportunity to do enough with the character in a way that was going to appeal to my sensibilities. And like Keaton, he's very unique. But the version of that character that I probably enjoyed the best was ironically probably the one that showed up in The Flash, um, with him kind of all over the place and being kind of dynamic and stuff like that. So yeah, he'll always be the nostalgic favorite, but I think Bale is the closest to that Batman that I've
The
always
yeah.
wanted to see on the big screen. Yeah.
What would you say is your favorite Batman story?
Ah, honestly, Batman the Cult is my favorite. It's a weird.
Really?
It's yeah, it's a weird pick.
Interesting.
Uh, yeah, it's got it's pretty niche. I fully admit that a lot of my love for that story probably falls with me reading only the fourth issue at a far younger age than I probably should have when it showed up in a pile of comics that a friend's mom or friend was getting rid of that his brother had accumulated. But that story and just having um, the exploration of Bruce's ethos
Mhm.
um, on display and all the morality plays throughout that storyline. It's like honestly, it's the coolest that Jason Todd ever was as Robin.
Yeah.
And yeah, and even though it has like that non-conventional climax with how Batman um, retakes Gotham, I think it's underappreciated as to how much it informed things. Like The Dark Knight Rises is quite
Yeah.
based on that story. Um, yeah, I love the whole concept of Bruce being as thoroughly broken as he was, but not by the Joker and not through the death of one of somebody close to him. Like they didn't fridge somebody to take Bruce down to honestly bare bones. Like he's down and out by the time that third, fourth issue comes up, and he has like you never see Batman as full of self doubt as you do in that
Yeah.
storyline, and um, yeah, and certainly that was one of the earliest experiences with those types of things. Like once Death in the Family hit, like they'd always go back to that angsty, broken Batman. And we've got it quite a bit in recent years, but like there's just something very yeah very salient as to how they did it with that storyline, and it's always just stayed with me, and I just love it. Like it's a cool one. Like I don't know. It's not for everybody for sure, and then I can appreciate people that don't dig it. But yeah, I always go back to that one.
I remember you doing, an episode of the Batman Book Club on it with,
Mhm.
you know, fellow senior contributor Ryan Lauer, and, it's funny that you bring that up because I just bought that deluxe edition. It arrived, like, a week or 2 ago. I have, like, an old trade that I got at a used bookstore, and I have the 4th issue, mainly and I mentioned this in the last chapter by chapter, like, there's that great, quote on the back of that issue about why he became Batman. It wasn't to fight crime, it was to overcome the fear. And as we're going to get into with this episode, like fear is a very big theme for this movie and how it affects you and how you can overcome it. Um, so I'm definitely not as well versed in the cult as I assume you are, but I do have a little soft spot for it as well. And yeah, now I'm gonna have to like move that deluxe edition up on my reading list just to appreciate it in all its oversized glory. Before we get into the episode proper, one last question. What is your favorite Batman collectible that you
Oh,
have?
man.
As
Yeah,
I
I've got
look behind you, you've got a great shelf of toys behind you.
yeah, I do have lots of cool swag. I've been very blessed in that regard. Um, yeah, and I probably won't go for the most opulent, but truly, I always go back to that Superpowers Batmobile. Like it's that
Nice.
toy I always wanted when I was a kid, and I remember trading some issues of Spawn for it at a comic store that had like an absolutely mint one that had come in the 90s, and yeah, I love that thing. There's things that are worth far more in this basement and are far more impressive, but yeah, my house is burning down and I can only grab one thing. There's a lot of things down here that are too big to take out, but I'd probably grab that, to be honest with you.
Nice. Mine has seen better days. I got it for Christmas, whenever Christmas 84, 85, along with Green Lantern and the Flash, because
Okay.
well, I already had a Batman and Robin figure, but if ever there were two characters that needed a Batmobile, it would be Green Lantern and the Flash. The guy who can run fast and the guy who can fly. But yeah, that is a great. I had so many fun adventures with my action figures with that thing. But now it's like missing the front cockpit, like windshields, and a lot of the paint's rubbed off. But
It just means that it was well loved. That's all.
yeah, the wheels no longer really click with that little thing because it's been worn out. But we had some good adventures. But for today's episode, we are looking at what we've designated as Chapter 4. You always fear what you don't understand, which starts at the 28-minute, 26-second mark and runs till 35 minutes and 54 seconds. And we open with Bruce going to confront Falcone at the restaurant. Where do you stand on the pronunciation? Is it Falcone or Falcone?
I think Falcone.
Yeah, that's where I've always kind of been. And I'm glad that the Batman gave us that alternate pronunciation, because it doesn't ruin the movie for me, but it does throw me off, because that's not how I ever read it as a reader, as a kid reading Year One. But Bruce comes in to show Falcone that he's not afraid, but Falcone emphasizes who's in the room and how, despite all the law enforcement and public officials, he could blow Bruce's head off and get away with it. What do you make of that assertion?
Well, it was an ideal way to set up not only Falcone as your nemesis for the first half of the movie, and just it really justified why Bruce, in this heightened reality world that Nolan was creating, would have to adopt the persona of Batman and couldn't pursue conventional ways of having a retribution for what happened to his parents, I guess, for lack of a better term, because that plays out in the real world. He becomes a police officer. He starts to fund different law enforcement initiatives, start some kind of organization to stop gun violence, has some kind of charity initiative to address the poverty in the streets that he talks about with Rachel, that led to what happened to his parents in the lead up to this scene. So I thought it was a great way of setting the table as to why, I can't do this the conventional way. I can't use the systems in Gotham that are existing already, because they won't play ball and they've all been corrupted, right? And
Yeah.
with having, like, especially that judge in that scene, it just it was really efficient storytelling in having Bruce come to this realization that in order to affect the change that he wants to, he can't use any of the existing institutions. So I thought it was a brilliant way of going about it, and it starts off kind of odd that it's just like, well, why would this guy go in here and go in as half-cocked as he did? Like, what did he hope to accomplish by taking Rachel up on her challenge? And to see why they had that scene placed where they did, I thought was just brilliant.
With that in mind, like, how influential is Falcone in Bruce becoming Batman? Do you think he holds as much culpability as Joe Chill?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, and I think they hammered that home with the conversation that he has with Rachel before that. And you have Rachel, who's a little more connected and a little more knowledgeable as to how things work because of her position as the district, or as an assistant district attorney, right? So she kind of sees the realities as to not only the people that she's dealing with and that she's prosecuting, but she would be exposed to the history that led them to that point, right? So those are the things that we can infer informed her, but that Bruce wouldn't be privy to, right? Because Bruce is living a life of wealth, and then he's also got his rage that they've well established has been hampering him in his day-to-day life and his ability to get an education and all those types of things. So yeah, with that, you kind of have Falcone sitting in this position of power, and he's causing this harm to happen to all these people. That's causing um, the infestation of crime to occur in Gotham City, which then leads back to why his parents got killed, which is why I've always really embraced the unknown assailant killing Thomas and Martha Wayne, or Joe Chill just being a street level criminal as opposed to some part of some grand conspiracy and whatnot that they've played with in stories in recent years. I do appreciate that there's a connection to the genesis of Batman being just crime that could happen to, unfortunately, any person on any day, kind of thing. So I think Falcone being somebody that causes these things, being able to live high on the hog, to be able to compromise all these um, systems that are supposed to be in place to protect the populace, he absolutely has as much culpability as Joe Chill does.
And Falcone dismisses Bruce and causing his men to rough him up. But before he gets tossed out, though, like he administers like one final sting, stating that Chill told him Thomas begged like a dog before he was murdered. Did you get rankled on Bruce's behalf hearing that?
Yeah, like for me, it really showed how much of a jerk Falcone is. Just the way he decides to deliver that parting shot. I don't. I never for a second thought that there was any truth to it, but just
Yeah.
yeah, Falcone's just his viciousness and his pettiness and his cruelty is what and it was a great scene because it showed how well Falcone could read people, and he knew that just saying something offhanded and curt like that to Bruce would greatly affect him, given the esteem that he held his father in, right? And dismissing the fact that Bruce was right there and still kind of trying to rub that salt in the wound, I thought was brilliant. And it yeah, it did a lot to build up the character of Falcone.
This is probably his best scene in the movie. How familiar were you with actor Tom Wilkinson before this film? And what did you think of his portrayal of this character?
I thought he was great as Falcone. He was quite believable as a big boss for a criminal organization. He's looked like he had enough years under him to have worked his way into that rank and that profile, but at the same time, he um, he also had like a viciousness that suggested that he'd be able to manipulate people and get them to be subservient to him. But as far as my experience with Tom Wilkinson, I didn't really remember him a ton. One of the things that does stick out is my buddy's parents, who are English. Um, they had gone to see in the movie, and they were just like, "Holy smokes, that movie was brilliant!" But they had a real issue and were ripped out of the movie by Wilkinson because they're so used to him talking in his
British
natural
accent.
voice. Yeah.
He had done he's done a lot of things, like the Full Monty. But the thing that stuck out for me was In the Bedroom, because it was like an Academy Award nominated movie back in like 2001. He was also in like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But I, like your friend's parents, knew him as British, and it took me out of the movie too. Like hearing him do that, stereotypical like Italian accent. I was like, what is going, like, it threw me out of the loop. I like it now. But like the first time I saw it, I was like, this, I don't know if this is working out for me so much. But 20
Yeah.
years has definitely softened the edges on that for me. So I was curious if you had, I know you're a big cinephile too, if you'd seen him in other things and if that made an impression on you back
Yeah,
then.
I've seen him in things since, and obviously he sticks out because he's one of those, "Hey, that guy," character actor type of guys as well for a lot of projects, so you recognize him, but he maybe didn't stick out in my mind as much until we got to Batman Begins, and then, of course, all those actors become beloved parts of the family, and you notice them when they pop up in other things.
But I think overall, like I do appreciate him now, and I don't, did you have the video game for
Yes.
this?
Yeah,
Like, they
the
had that.
Xbox game or whatever.
Yeah, I had it on PS2, but there's, like, that special feature you can unlock, and it's got, I mean, all the cast is pretty much back to do their voices in the game, and it was cool to see, like, him and Morgan Freeman and Michael Caine, in the booth, and then, talking about it, and I'm trying to remember if it's him or Caine who's like, "We have a computer, and I'm told it's in this room, and it does something," but, like, doesn't really know a whole lot about video games. It might be Michael Caine, but it's cool to see him and just all the people in it, like, take part in, like, another aspect of it, because that wasn't really done a lot, and a lot back then, and a lot of video games of that time, like, you wouldn't expect major actors to be involved because it was kind of like a cheap tie-in thing. And
Yeah.
everyone raves about the Arkham games, and rightfully so, but, like, that Batman Begins game is really, really solid, I think.
Well, and it kinda set the template for it, like, I remember having my mind blown by the fact that there's, like, a couple levels where you can do it, but where you can go up into the roof and you can pull the guys up, and I'm just like, "You can do that in the Arkham games and the Spider-Man games, but they
Yeah.
stole that from Batman Begins." That's where that came from the first time, and yeah,
Yeah.
that was a phenomenal game.
Yeah, you weren't really doing that kinda thing in, like, the Raimi video games. So, yeah, and then you had, the Batmobile too. So you had those optional Batman or Batmobile levels that were a lot of fun. Um, but after Bruce gets unceremoniously ejected, he gets greeted by a man warming himself by a trash can fire, who tells him he should have tipped better. And Bruce starts dumping his pockets out in the fire, but not before giving the man his money in exchange for his coat. And the man asks for Bruce's coat since it's nice, and Bruce gives it to him with a caveat to be careful who sees him in it. Is Bruce being generous, or is he putting this guy in mortal danger?
I don't know, I that scene always has had a ton of charm to me,
Yeah,
um, because we've seen so many movies and so many comic book movies where, um, they're a little careless with how they treat the mindset of the characters towards just kind of the regular people that they interact with, and you can tell it's because the people making the film don't have the reverence and love for the characters that we do. So I love the fact that instead of just leaving, as Bruce kind of very acutely formulates his plan and heads into uh, the outset of his training for his mission, that he has has that moment where he strips himself completely of his life and his world, but instead of pocketing the cash, that he uses it to buy the coat off of the man at the fire there, and then the exchange and the delivery with the coat thing and how it comes back later on in the movie, I thought was just great. Like I love that. My wife and I still use that kind of nice coat thing
a nice coat.
back and forth. Yeah,
Yeah,
when just like a month or two ago, her dad had gotten a coat from an organization he volunteers with, and he puts it on. He's like, "Nice coat," and she turns to me and does the nice coat thing in same voice as the fella there by the fire. So, yeah, it's been an indelible part of our lives for a long time. So I got a very soft spot for that scene.
And I'm gonna butcher this. He's played by Rade Surbedziga. I can't pronounce it, but he was the first thing I saw him in was in The Saint. He was the bad guy opposite Val Kilmer in the 1997 movie adaptation.
Okay.
So he was like this up and coming like Russian politician who was trying to change the establishment, and he was like the main guy that former Batman Val Kilmer was going up against. So it was kind of cool to see, in my fan brain, it's all connected. And so it was interesting to see this former Batman villain now kind of aiding the new Batman on his journey there. He was
Oh,
also
that's
Boris
cool.
the Blade in Snatch. If you haven't seen that Guy Ritchie movie, that's a lot of fun. He's really memorable in that part as well. But
Yeah, I knew him from Stigmata because he had like a
oh
great
yeah.
scene in there where he delivers some pretty interesting theological perspectives in character, and that's what I remembered him from. And he has a bit of the same delivery and begins as he does in that scene there. So um, that was my connection to him, whose name I shall not butcher.
Yeah, just Rade or
Yeah.
R. I don't even know if that's pronounced right. But with that exchange, Bruce takes off into the night, beginning his path to avenge his parents. And the film then enters a montage as Bruce narrates to Deckard how he learned about stealing, about crime, and about his assumptions about right and wrong. Like during this sequence, do you feel that Bruce was a criminal?
Uh, like maybe where he immersed himself in it, but at the same time, you very much got the sense that he offset any kind of um, criminal action that he undertook. Like just the way that they played this Bruce the whole time. Like when he steals the piece of fruit, you kind of get the sense
Yeah.
that later on in the story, there's a moment where he pays double for something else with that same guy or invests in him in some way, and um, and they kind of lay the seeds for Bruce being that kind of guy with the scene where um, they bust him as part of the gang doing the big heist, and sure, he had engaged in the criminal enterprise of stealing the stuff, but it was Wayne Enterprises property that he was stealing as part of his education with the criminal element type of thing. So yeah, I didn't have a problem with it per se. With him engaging in a bit of criminality. He was undercover to do his thing, and you read the memoirs of any UCO, you'll find similar things that they're engaged with, and the tap dance that they have to do to make sure that no grievous harm and permanent damage is done to somebody. So yeah, it just fit of a piece with that whole world that we have in our real life with undercover operators having to engage in similar type of things in order to obtain evidence from criminals. And in this case, Bruce was just using it to learn and discover their tactics to serve the greater good.
Like I thought it was really interesting when I first saw this. Like I can't picture like squeaky clean Adam West doing something like this, Um, whether it was to survive or not. Um, but there is also an element of like, Bruce stealing the fruit and then sharing it with the hungry kid that feels very Robin Hoodish. And then, thinking back to like the untold legend of Batman, where in that story, Bruce was the first Robin and took inspiration from Robin Hood. Like, again, fan brain, like it's all connected. Like just seeing these little things and how they tie into it. And then I was kind of wondering, he's stealing his own stuff, so he's not a criminal. But then, like, what about the people that he brought with him on the heist? You know, did he form relationships with them? Did he, like we've seen like the animated series and other comics of how he would reform people and offer him jobs at Wayne Enterprises, and I wonder, similar to like what you were saying, like I wonder if Bruce later on sent out like a helping hand to these guys that were on that crew to try and give them an alternative to crime. It was like in a wider narrative, when we're not confined to like a 2-hour movie runtime. I'd like to think that this Bruce Wayne, like you were saying, he would do something like that. He would have those outreaches to people. And you always get that random voice on the internet that's like, Batman's a sociopath, and if he wanted to help, he would do all these charitable things and give his money to the poor. It's like he does that too. It just doesn't get as sensationalized because it's not good for a click, you know.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, and it's just silly. It's like,
Yeah.
it's a fictional character. Like the stories are pretty boring pretty quick if you're just reading about a philanthropist and his charitable organizations. It's not
Yeah.
gonna not gonna sell a ton of comic books.
Yeah, for sure. And we rejoin Ducard and Bruce in the present. Both are adorned in black armor, with Ducard mixing some concoction out of the blue flower Bruce brought earlier. And Nolan touches on the theme of fear again, how Bruce fears several things, and now he must journey inwards. Uh, how tied in is your conception of Batman with fear?
Hey y'all, it's Bill Ramey, founder of Batman on Film. Let's take a quick pause in this podcast for these words from our sponsor.
Well, I think fairly. Like I said, the Cult was one of my formative books, so that was the driving um, force of the narrative for that story. And granted, it had been probably a decade where the only issue I had to read was the fourth one, but there was that one. Yeah, one like year one, right? We get Bruce's epic failure on his first night um, as a crime fighter because the absence of fear and the absence of being something larger than life sees it fail spectacularly. So, yeah, I think it was perfect that one in how purposeful they were in building the narrative that fear was going to be the theme for the movie, that they carry it all the way through from when Bruce is a child, and then that this becomes um, part of the climax of his training, I guess, if you will.
And as Bruce inhales the fumes of the burning flower, he starts hallucinating. And it's perhaps like the most like mystical or metaphysical aspect of all the trilogy, but it's still grounded in reality, like in science. Um, as we go into this sequence, does Nolan pull off these heightened moments for you when we're so grounded in tactile, but now like the screen is starting to shake, people's eyes are glowing weird. Um, does he is he able to pull off both tones?
Well, I think so. Well, like you said, it's very much connected to things that happen in the real world, right? And with hallucinogens and um, other like naturally occurring um, intoxicants, and we have a appreciation and a real world point of reference for those types of things. So I thought it worked well. I thought it was subtle enough that you could see Bruce realistically fighting through it, and um, to be this kind of super ninja, like he'd have to be able to overcome his faculties being impaired, and we see that happen a couple times in the future during the film. And yeah, I thought that he did it well. It was subtle enough that he maintained his tone and sensibility for like during the movie, but at the same time was able to convey that the grander scale of Bruce's Bruce's fear and having to overcome it in order to pass this final test.
I think so much of the discourse has been about how grounded Nolan is as a filmmaker, and everything's got to be real and everything's got to be plausible, and something you could actually pull off in real life. And so watching it again, like seeing this part surprised me. Just it's there are those elements in this movie that are a little bordering on the fantastical, um but he weaves it in such a way that you don't even really notice that it's happening. You don't question it because we're still in that era of comic book movies where they had to pander to the audience. Like they weren't going to take the campiness of like a Batman and Robin serious, but those are like different takes on the material. And just because it's based on a source of a comic book doesn't mean that it has to be bright and neon and weird Dutch angles. Like you can tell a serious story, and I feel like we kind of forget that Nolan did have some flourishes in his trilogy as well, that it wasn't all just serious stuff. Like there were comic booky aspects. And not to jump too far ahead, but like the whole revelation of Raish, where he's got that line, he's like, are his methods supernatural? And he doesn't answer that question for you in the movie, which I think is brilliant. So we're 20 years later. That's why we're doing this show. How does it feel to see Bruce spending formative time with the League of Shadows? Like, did that feel fresh and original to you back in 2005? And how does it feel now in a world where we've taken a closer look at Bruce's beginnings, like in stories like The Night?
No, it was totally fresh and original, and I loved it because it just made sense. I was like, because you knew um, the League of Assassins from the comic books and what they were all about, and I also had quite the soft spot for like Son of the Demon, and
Yeah.
when Bruce is like basically on the precipice of becoming Raish's heir. Um, I thought that that was a brilliant story, and then so to take that and just massage it into this film and kind of play with some of those concepts of, okay, well, what if like this guy does have to go on this training, and if it has to be intense, then what if we have a group like the League of Assassins do facilitate that training, and then we can use them to carry our narrative forward, and we'll just rename them as the League of Shadows. And the impact of that is clearly seen because we've had so many stories since that have been informed by the creative choices that Nolan took here. So it was kind of a neat juxtaposition of the film now informing the books a little bit, and it was natural. It wasn't to try and sell the movies and try and sell comic books based on the movies. It was just like, oh shoot, that's a really great um, storytelling device. And as we go into our perpetual reworkings and retcons that we have in the books, that they adopted some of that. And the other thing too, anybody listening to this and under the umbrella of the 20-year anniversary, um, it's hard to remember. As we have like literally right now in theaters, like a very over the top and unapologetically comic book Superman movie, and
Yeah.
an equally unapologetic comic book Fantastic Four movie in theaters that they were very apologetic with everything they did. Back when Batman Begins came out, there's a reason the X-Men didn't wear their costumes and
Uh-huh.
didn't have the more fantastical elements of their powers on full display, particularly in that first film. There's a reason why the TV shows never had the characters in costume, and would only wink at the fact that they they had all these abilities underneath, and that they might evolve into the costume characters that we loved and embraced. And it wasn't all for cost. A lot of it, and particularly in the development of Batman Begins, was that we have to make this so we can sell it to a quote unquote uh, general audience, because they won't get comic books, and the comic book guys will show up anyways. Um, and that's probably the most special thing about the MCU, is that it drug a massive um, amount of the population into this world, but that wasn't available to Nolan and the filmmakers when they put this movie to screen. So that's why this one really has a special place in my heart, because it did it so brilliantly. And it the reality of that sensibility, that you can't do the full full chest comic book thing, is probably why Batman worked so well, because he was that one that was um, just on that he's maybe a couple degrees different than James Bond type of thing. So yeah, we can make this movie. And like Spider-Man was kind of the outlier, where it's like, okay, that character is undeniably popular, so we have to do something with him. But we got to figure it out. So yeah, it was just a different time back then, which makes what they did with Batman Begins that much more impressive.
Yeah, it's like the context is so important. Like you mentioned, the X-Men and their all black leather uniforms, and making a joke about, what were you expecting, yellow spandex? And here
Mhm.
we are in a Deadpool and Wolverine world where we finally have that comic accurate costume, even down to like the winged head on the mask. But it's worth noting that, like, at this point, Smallville is halfway through its run, and no one was wearing costumes in that show until we finally get to Green Arrow, who's got a comic look. But like people like Impulse, Cyborg, they were in their colors for their characters, but they weren't like super suits like we would see on like the CW verse shows. Um, you brought up Fantastic Four, like Batman Begins is right in the middle of an era where we didn't have a Galactus because people wouldn't believe it. It had to be like a cosmic storm cloud. We couldn't see that full character due to budget and just the belief that audiences wouldn't accept it. Um, so it's a very interesting period that this movie's coming out in, especially I think being the first movie after Batman and Robin, which was so exaggerated and cartoony to its detriment, that they had to reestablish these rules. And and I feel like over the last 20 years, like we've forgotten how big a deal this was. Because there were stories about Batman's past before, like I mentioned, the Untold Legends of Batman, and there's The Man Who Falls, which was an inspiration. Occasionally we would see, like, here's a story with one of Batman's old teachers, or is it The Many Deaths of Batman, where there was like a serial killer and he was taking out all these different people that had taught Bruce, which was at the same time Detective had the story they introduced Ducard to audiences as like one of his mentors. But like having it be him spending time with the League of Shadows was like a new wrinkle, because we knew he had studied, martial arts and how to fight, but to see it on the big screen, like, gave it a different relevance, and it made it more acceptable, I think, to the mass audience, because more people have seen Batman Begins than were reading comics at the time, based on like sales numbers. So like going forward, and we started getting more stories in that vein, and like I mentioned, Zdarsky's Batman the Night, which feels very much like he's trying to insert a lot of the vibe and energy from the first half of this movie into Batman's origin and weave it in before like Batman Year One. We've just lived with it for so long that it's like, oh yeah, kind of forgot like this is where it started. And it just had such a big impact on Batman going forward. There's a lot of great quotes in this scene as like Bruce is starting to he's starting to trip out on stuff. You know, a lot of the lessons that he incorporates into his identity of men fear most what they cannot see. You have to become a terrible thought. You have to become an idea. Feel terror cloud your senses. Feel its power to distort, to control, and know this power can be yours. Become one with the darkness. And that's all stuff that we see later in that first night of him as Batman. Was there any particular line from this that struck out at you or struck a chord with you?
Yeah, like becoming one with the darkness, I thought was a great foreshadowing to him taking that a step further. And it's like, okay, well, I won't just become a ninja. I'll become, well, that which I dread type of thing. So that one for sure. I always love that the whole you can leave no mark thing, and with Bruce uses that as a bit of a turnaround. Obviously, something that he encountered during his training, and I love that Nolan trusted the audience enough to not have to spell it out for us, where he's just like, yeah, no, you'll get it, and
Yeah.
that they had that play out that way. But yeah, just all that dialogue, it's so rich, and it's more than anything, it's just so reverent to the character. And like I was saying, there was a time where they didn't trust us as the audience with getting these characters, and that Nolan was able to thread that needle so deftly into making this a movie that any person coming in to take in a film could absolutely adore, and that also spoke to comic book fans that knew what he was channeling.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this like slighting Year One at all, but he goes through, Skid Row and they're not afraid of him as the, you know, disfigured vet costume that he's got on. And we see the bat crash through the window, and that's what inspires him, right? And that's taken from like the old comics. But here, like, Nolan adds to the mythology by bringing in the League of Assassins or the League of Shadows, sorry, and adding in like the fear element to it, like because he was and throwing in the man who falls, like he was afraid of the hole and the bats that he found there, and I feel like incorporating the bad aspect of him being afraid of it that early in his life, like that just adds another level of richness to finding like a bat in his home of pushing him towards that as his identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what like a good adaptation does is it takes what worked so well and then translating it and adding a different layer to it when they present their version of the story. And I think he just little by little seeds it into the film. And this is like just a key scene to that structure. And I also like that there's an aspect of a dance, as Bruce and Ducard stalk each other. And while Nolan is putting out, all that dialogue that we just talked about, that's going to shape who Bruce forms the Batman as. It's not just that. Like he's also giving us a prime example here of how like smart and how intuitive and how tactical his thinking already is, and it's sleight of hand. It's a magic trick. And do you see like that commonality across this trilogy and some of like Nolan's other works where he's kind of doing one thing in one hand, but then he's doing something else in the other hand while you're not really thinking about it or looking?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And probably the main thing with him employing those tactics is that he does always tee it up, and if you knew what to look for, you could have known because he's given you all the pieces, which a lot of storytellers will be like, "Oh, you just didn't know about this over here, but it was going on, and this is how we resolve this." Whereas with what Nolan's doing here, and what he does throughout this trilogy and through so many of his other films, is that he gives you little pieces that are there to set this up, and then when he um, has his big reveal as to what the scene is going to play out and what the reality of what's happening um, is brought to life in front of us, that he's already given us those pieces, and that it just makes sense and it just fits, and it's a payoff more than an exposition.
And how did you like? I don't want to call it a fight, but like, what did you think of like this scene of them weaving in and out of the other ninjas and how they would, you know, he would mark someone and then,
Yeah, I liked it. Like, I think you hit the nail on the head where it was a great way to show um how tactical Bruce was, his ability to think on his feet, his ability to adjust on the fly, which all of which really led to us embracing this quite formidable Batman once the time comes, right? Where it's not just blunt force through the whole trilogy that he's using to try and um, overcome his objectives. And in fact, in the trilogy, the one time that he's not tactical and that he does try and just overpower his enemy is the time that he loses so spectacularly.
yeah.
So it's a kind of neat bookend to what we get in Rises eventually.
No, that's a really good point about his face off with Bane. Um, well, that's pretty much it for this chapter. I think we covered everything. Was there anything that you wanted to bring up that we didn't touch on?
No, it was such a cool lens to watch this chapter through, knowing that I was responsible for acutely talking about just this kind of 10 minutes of this movie. 10 minutes in which there's no super heroics, where it's all kind of during the formulation of Bruce as a character early on. And yeah, no, it was a cool experience. So yeah, thank you once again for having me on and having me view this part of this beloved film that through a lens I would have never looked at it through.
Man, I always love talking Batman with you, so I'm happy that you accepted the invitation. But I know you're a busy guy, lots of different shows. Where can people find you? Do you have anything you want to promote?
You know what? I every kind of monthish, 6 weeks, I pop up in the Vigilante 1939 podcast with a sub show called Box Office Beyond, where Nick Zednick and I just look at the box office goings on of not just comic book films, but all films in general, and just kind of explore the dynamics as to what people are watching and why, and how that factors in with the industry and whatnot. So that's always a really good time, to be honest with you, and it's pretty airy and a quick jaunt through that. And yeah, you can find me a couple times a day on the old X there at Canadian Cape Crusader. I'm not on there nearly as much as I used to be, but yeah, those are kind of my two spots that if you enjoyed the discussion here and you want to catch me somewhere else, where you can find me.
And I may be mistaken, but didn't you just appear on the Batman Book Club recently?
I did, yeah. Just I guess it would have been the episode that dropped the week that Superman came out, and uh, Mr. Lauer and I discussed Dark Knight over Metropolis, a another book where made quite the impact on a young me back in the day, and yeah, poor Ryan had to suffer through what I forgot was a very, very mired in the lore of Superman supporting cast book, where I had been reading that kind of week to week as it had come out, and was very familiar with everything, and didn't realize that I'd dumped my friend into to a story that had a ton of stuff that happened before and a ton of stuff that happens after. But it's a great little read, and hopefully an enjoyable listen if anybody wants to check that one out.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in the post-crisis Superman, that storyline is like their third crossover. Like you had Man of Steel issue 3, then you had the annual with the Vampire Girl, which I know Ryan talked about, I think with Garrett. And I want to say this is like the third time they did a story together.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but
I'm
you did
pretty
mention,
sure.
yeah, you did briefly mention. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think they wanted to have a bit of a tight continuity with the rebooted Superman, and so I do think that it was just those three, and it was only in his books, right? Because it was it was Man of Steel miniseries, the Action Annual, and then Dark Knight over Metropolis takes place, despite being a crossover, just over 3 Superman books, as opposed to jumping back and forth between the Superman books and the Detective or Batman.
It was before. Was it before Death in the Family?
Yes,
I don't
and they
remember.
had quite a few crossovers after
Yeah.
Dark Knight over Metropolis, if memory serves.
Just really quick before we get out, you mentioned, talking box office with Zeddy on the Vigilante 1939 podcast. It's what day is this? It's August 4th as we record this. We just had the Super Jurassic whatever July, where we had Jurassic World and Superman and Fantastic Four. Before going into this summer, where would you have thought those 3 movies would have fallen out? Like, who do you think would have won July?
Won July overall. Overall, I thought it was going to be Superman for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
I thought that Superman was gonna. I did the part that I got right was that Superman would be the domestic champion, and that Jurassic was probably gonna take the international. The part that I didn't get right was that Jurassic took the whole thing, or well, not it didn't take but it beat those other 2 movies quite handily. As far as the overall box office haul, like it's already, I think, out of reach for what Superman can get to, and Fantastic Four has kind of no chance to get it after what played out this weekend. So yeah, that part surprised me. I and you know what, the reviews and the well, not only Rotten Tomato scores, but even things like the letterbox scores and whatnot kind of played out my theory that it was a little too soon for the Jurassic movie, and that audience were looking for something fresh based on how Superman and Fantastic Four did by those same metrics. But at the same time, everybody still went to go see Jurassic World, so it made all the money.
Surprisingly so. I mean, there's like 2 ways to look at it, right? Because like box office wise, it's made over 300 million US. But compared to the Jurassic World or Jurassic Park franchises, like it's diminishing returns basically, but they also made it for a smaller budget, so their profit margins are probably staying the same. But it was, of the 3 of those movies, like it was easily my least favorite. I know I texted you and Zeddy about it. Like it's not a bad movie by any stretch. I feel like it's an okay movie. And it has a lot of, well, I saw something like this in Jurassic Park, or this is like the scene in The Lost World, or this is reminiscent of Jurassic Park 3. Um, and there's always going to be like commonalities and tropes in a lot of these things, but just nothing really excited me about it. None of the characters really popped for me. So I'm surprised that it's had the legs that it has, other than it's summer, it's hot, and here's some cool looking dinosaurs. But I would imagine by the end of the week, I think Superman will overtake it in the domestic box office, because it's just been having legs. So I think as of like today, it's like 1 million behind Jurassic World. So that's what's impressive to me, is that we're at this point, and DC finally has a hit. Because if you throw any other DC against whatever Marvel movie that came out around the similar time, like it's not even a competition. It's a bloodbath. Be it BVS versus Civil War or Captain Marvel versus Shazam, like DC was always the underdog. And it's been interesting to see both the Fantastic Four and Superman, who have had similar theatrical troubles of like getting an audience to get excited, and they're very similar in their positioning, of Superman being the first superhero and Fantastic Four being the first Marvel book, really. Like they have like a similar pedigree, but they're both going after very different audiences with their aesthetics. And while there are obviously certain similarities, like, hey, Superman's fighting Lex Luthor, and the Fantastic Four are going up against Galactus and the Silver Surfer, they're told in such different ways that it felt more fresh to me, especially Fantastic Four with the aesthetics. Felt more fresh and innovative than like Jurassic World did. So honestly didn't know who was going to come out on top, but I definitely have had the best time at Superman this summer. And, I've seen it 4 times now. So that says it all, versus I really don't have any desire to revisit Jurassic World again anytime soon. And FF, I'll probably wait until it's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, no, I'm very much on the same page with Superman, by far being the one that I fell in love with out of those 3 movies at the theater. I quite like the other 2. I gotta admit, I'm a pretty easy mark for the Jurassic franchise. So outside of the whole mutated dinosaur thing at the end, like things like that raft scene, just yeah, here's my money, go ahead kind of thing. But yeah, no, it's cool that Superman's gonna undoubtedly take that number 1 spot at the domestic box office, and we're 2 days away from Jurassic hitting PVOD, so it'll be out of theaters. Yeah, pretty quick. Yeah,
Pretty
Universal's
soon,
pretty fast on that turnaround. So by all accounts, Superman's staying in theaters for a month, so it'll have some
I
legs
think I
there. And
saw VOD at the end of August is what I saw today.
oh, okay. Yeah, I hadn't seen that, but I
Yeah.
know somebody had thrown out some August dates, but quite a bit earlier than the end of August, and Gunn had shot those down. So that's good that it'll have like a good month, 2-month run kind of thing, or it'll have basically a month left in the theaters without the PVOD. And yeah, I think where they'll really start to fall off is once it shows up on streaming services type of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's a bit unfortunate that Fantastic Four has fallen off a cliff, but at the same time, like as a DC fan and with Superman having had its date first, I'm glad that it gets to take the W on this one.
Yeah, it's definitely they needed, compared to, prior versions like Superman Returns and Man of Steel, maybe, not reaching audiences or being embraced the way that people would hope they would have been embraced. And it's one thing to consider too when we're talking box office, that this is a very different environment that we're releasing into. There are more screens than before. And while Man of Steel, like, people will argue, well, it made more with inflation. It's like, that is true, but Man of Steel also had a much longer theatrical run than movies get these days. And it wasn't competing with streaming or the mentality that, well, I'll just wait for it to come out in streaming, because post-pandemic, that 45-day window of then hitting it in your home like really hurt the theatrical model, I think. So the fact that we're even talking,
no, it also had the benefit of coming out at the apex of the excitement for comic book movies. You're coming off of the Dark Knight trilogy is the greatest thing ever, and we want to see what you're doing next. And you're getting the Dark Knight guy to shepherd in the new DC connected universe, and we're excited for that because we love what Marvel has been doing, and we're off this unforeseen meteoric success of the Avengers. So yeah, here we go, right? And so it had that benefit where everybody was excited and willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, whereas this Superman movie's coming out where the both brands have taken some black eyes in recent years.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an interesting comparison too of Batman Begins and Superman, because they're both kind of having to do the same thing of having to rebuild audience trust. So we'll see if in 20 years time where people are breaking down Superman like we are Batman Begins. But that's what we do here on Batman on Film. So that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Of course, you can go to batmanonfilm.com and read my written reviews for like Batman and Robin Year One. And up on the YouTube, we've got a unboxing and review of the Tweeterhead Batman Hush maquette in blue and gray. And obviously on the YouTube channel as well, you can listen to all these social hours and chapter by chapters to your heart's desire. So with all that said, we are going to have announcer Rachel take us out.
You have been listening to Batman on Film Chapter by Chapter, a BatmanOnFilm.com podcast revisiting the cinematic adventures of the Dark Knight, scene by scene, chapter by chapter. Follow Jet on Twitter at Batman on Film. For BOF news only, follow at the Batman on Film on Twitter. To become a BOF patron, go to patreon.com/BatmanOnFilm. To advertise on BOF, visit advertisecast.com/BatmanOnFilm. For Jet and Team BOF, I'm announcer Rachel. Authoritative, definitive, the original. Batman on Film. Established in 1998.
Our place is filled with Batman fans. It's been around songs since '98 began. Roll with the news and all the reviews. It's the go-to place to take the Gotham blues. Got a cape and cowl on knees and high. That man on film, so glad it's alive. That man on film, you thrill us so. From Gotham City to the Batmobile roll. That man on film, ever strong. Feels like home where we all belong. Lights out, we're scanning the latest flick. Nothing like a sight that gives us that kick. We're keeping to bail the icons we hail. Never miss a beat on the Bat-Cena trail. Turn the page, let the journey begin. Batman been wearing that baby. Where we all been Batman on film. You thrill us so. From Gotham City to the Batmobile roll. Batman on film, living strong. Feels like home where we all belong. In a world full of shadows, you bring light to us all. Every post and follow, answer the call. Batman on film, you thrill us so. Gotham City to the battlefield roll. Batman on film, the level strong. Feel Stockholm.